Hi guys, today I'm going to talk about a book written by Reed Tucker, Slugfest. So it's 260 pages. And why did I read this book? In fact, I like the comics movies from Marvel and from DC, but I don't have a big knowledge about this. My knowledge is quite limited. So I wanted to understand a bit more about those two companies and how they came up with those ideas and how they came to this huge success. As you know, The Avengers is the best #1 top box selling movie in the world and in the history. So the success is tremendous. So let us first start with a little bit of history. It all started in 1938, just before the Second World War II. DC, at that time, it was called Detective Comics. They came up with this concept of a comic book. So they released Superman in 1938. And at that time, the Americans, they went through the Great Depression and the First World War, so they were kind of a bit, I can say, depressed. And this energy coming from Superman with a superhero was needed in that period of time. So the release of Superman in 1938 was an innovation that will change the face of entertainment in the decades to come. And even today, almost more than 80 years later, Superman is still one powerful character. So in 1938, they came up with Superman, and later on with Wonder Woman and Batman. Those are the trinity for DC. And it's their cash cow. They are still milking this cash cow. Those are the three main characters since conception. There are a few additions that are still not so powerful, for example the Flash and Aquaman. But basically they just kept milking the cash cow of Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman with the movies, with the toys, merchandise until today. And Marvel arrived a bit later in the 50s. The beginning, Marvel was a very small company. In fact, they had only two people. Stan Lee, who was the editor, and Jack Kirby, who was in charge of the illustration. And both of those guys, they co-created the Marvel universe. Most of the characters come from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Marvel in the 50s was almost bankrupt. Only two people in one office. They didn't have distributors. Nobody wanted to distribute their magazines. But there was only one distributor willing to help them. And guess who was the distributor? Was DC, the head of the mother company of DC. They had one distributor who were in charge of distributing the magazines in different stores. So DC helped Marvel to start. In fact, it's not because they were nice to Marvel. It's because at that time you could not have a monopoly. So you had to have at least a second competitor. So they helped Marvel, but at the same time they limited Marvel. They just gave them the freedom of publishing 8 comic books per month. They could not be over those 8 comics per month. And in fact, DC could have crushed Marvel and made them disappear. So, and later on they would have harmed no competitor. So that's how it started. So let's talk about the differences between Marvel and DC. Marvel, the characters, they were more in touch with the real life. They were humans that gain power later in life, and they struggled with their new power, their new ability. They were living among humans, and they had to face all the anxiety, the stress, the issues of the society, like racism, the Vietnam War, women and emancipation, the black movement for freedom. All those were values that built Marvel. So the superheroes, they were at the beginning fighting against these new powers. They were like feeling like abnormal, and they were struggling to understand those powers. So in a sense, they were connected to the real world. They were living in the real cities and had the same issues as us. So people were connected with them. And I think this is the power of Marvel. They have this strength of storytelling. But when you see DC, they had Superman, who was a kind of a god power, Wonder Woman, she was a princess, Amazon princess, also godlike character. The Batman was a billionaire, rich like hell, able to do what he wants. So they were kind of a royalty. Superman was the son of Krypton. Aquaman was the king of the sea. And why it was like that? Because when they started in 1938, it was the period of the World War II. They went through this war, and the feeling was they needed superheroes that were above humans, and they kept this philosophy, those emotions in their character. So the way they define the characters, you can really see two different approaches. And Marvel was more innovative, more in touch with reality. For example, Marvel, they used real cities. Their heroes were living in New York. But when you see DC, their heroes were living in imaginary cities. Superman was living in Smallville, a metropolis, it doesn't exist. Batman was living in Gotham City, a city that doesn't exist. So they were living outside our world. They were disconnected. Even the choice of the cities, you can see, are disconnected from the world. The view of DC is people want to be disconnected, to dream. But Marvel was more rational, even though the stories are a bit, of course, it's a fantasy, but still Marvel were using these real human feelings to develop their characters. And also the way they draw. Marvel was raw. When they make a punch, you see the punch like huge in the page. But DC was drawing very smooth lines, making sure that the anatomy was perfect, the muscles, the size, everything was perfect. So even in the drawing, you can see the culture of Marvel more focused on the storytelling, didn't really much care about the small details, but DC was about perfection, the values of the characters, the design of the characters, the stories. The characters were all about justice, perfect justice. Wonder Woman was a virgin, Superman was a virgin at the beginning, so it was perfect values. It was a huge difference between those two great companies. And the company culture also was very different. When you see DC, it was a bit of an arrogant, haughty culture. The executives, they felt like they were the best. They didn't care about competition. They thought they were the best ever. So when Marvel came out, they just thought that this is just a fad. It's gonna disappear very soon. So they didn't pay attention to it. And once Marvel started to grow, they started to make meetings after meetings. surrounded ourselves on the table and discussed what's happening, why Marvel is successful. And they thought it was because of the number of words that they put on their cover. So they updated their covers with more words on the cover. And Marvel was playing around. They put more characters on the cover. Then DC put more characters on the cover. But the issue was not in the cover. The issue was inside the book. And DC didn't want to read the book. They thought it was like too lowly for them. So they didn't even bother to read the stories of Marvel. And that was a mistake. If you want to understand your the competition, you need to go deeper and catch what's the reason of their success. It's not just to look at the surface. And here it's a very good example because they just look not only at the surface, but they just look at the cover, that's it. I think it's a bit ridiculous, but very funny. And in the corporate world, I guess a lot of companies are using this approach of surface view and feeling, we are the best, arrogance, disregarding the competition. So that's, I think, a very interesting aspect of the book that shows, even in the entertainment business, this competitor to competitor, they disregarded each other, especially the Goliath, the big one. They disregarded the small competitors. But as we know today, Marvel is the new Goliath. He took the position of DC. He's much stronger than DC in terms of sales. And we all know that from all the success of their movies. So you see the arrogance of DC in their company culture, but you can see also in the way they design the characters, the storyline. It's all linked at the end of the day. But for me, the main, except the culture and the way the storytelling, one main difference that you can see between DC and Marvel is Marvel spent time to create what they call the continuity, making sure that all the stories are interconnected together. All have the same time frame, living in the same cities. They even, some characters meet with others. So you have Spider-Man meeting with Iron Man. It's a universe, and there is a cohesive story. The storyline is clear. Whereas DC, they have different timelines, different universe. They never cross each other. Why? Because the reason is simple. In DC, they had different editors. One in charge of Superman, one editor in charge of Batman, one editor in charge of Wonder Woman. And each editor, they didn't want to work with another editor. They didn't want their character to cross with another character. They were protective of their own universe. They didn't want to mix with somebody else and say, this is my character, this is my universe, I don't want to mix with nobody else. Inside the company, they were already having some clash. The difference with Marvel, as I said, they were limited in terms of publications per month. They were only able to publish 8 comics per month. So they didn't need to have an armada of editors. They had one editor, Stan Lee. And he was in charge of creating the full universe and connecting all the characters. So Spider-Man can meet with Iron Man, no problem, because the editor is one guy. And that's how the Marvel continuity came. And this is, I think, one big strength. If you watch the Marvel movies, they have 20 movies, 20-something movies, and they all cross each other in the Avengers. The Black Panther, Spider-Man, Ant-Man, Captain America, Guardian of the Galaxy. You see they're all connected, the same timeline, same universe, and that's how they can put all those characters in one movie. And all the stories, at the end, they had one goal, the final of Avenger. So this culture of continuity started in the 50s and kept going until today. So Marvel Studio, they kept the philosophy of having one guy in charge of the whole universe in the Marvel universe, Kevin Feige, yeah. He was in charge of reviewing all the scripts at the inception, and making sure that it matches with the Marvel universe, the Marvel culture, the Marvel feel. But DC, they had a different approach. So that's why you have Batmans coming from different directors. You have Batman that coming out from Christopher Nolan, The Dark Knight, which was a massive success. And then you have another Batman coming from Zack Snyder, which is kind of dark. Superman's also evolving from different directors, so the storylines are different. It doesn't feel the same movie, so it's a different approach. But let's not speak that everything that DC did was wrong. There was a big change coming from a CEO. Her name was Janet Kahn. DC wanted to change. They started to have a lot of pressure. Marvel was gaining market share and they wanted to come back. So they hired this new CEO, and she changed the corporate culture of DC. She changed the office, which was only cubicles before. She put a statue of Superman in the entrance. So you start to feel that, oh, this is a comics company. She asked people to dress like they want, not only with shirt and tie, because when you draw, do you have to dress like this? It was the old culture. She changed the salary scheme. People were paid according to their success. So if the comics was selling well, they will have a percentage of the sales. So some people turn to become millionaires. And this influenced Marvel later on, because they also had to keep their artists not to go to DC, so they also adopted this salary scheme. So she brought a lot of innovations. She started, people said, to marvelize the characters of DC. But there was a huge success of Superman, the movie, in 1978, December 15.
Hey, Jim! Whoa!
Excuse me.
That's a bad outfit!
God, look up there.
What the hell's that?
Easy, miss. I've got you.
At that time, it was one of my favorite movies when I was young. It was one of the best selling movie in that time, number 6 top selling movie. It was a huge success. And even Stanley said, hey, they're starting to take my ideas. They're making Superman looks like a Marvel character. The culture started to change. And Janet also hired a lot of people from Marvel to just go and poach them, giving them higher salaries, inviting them for dinner, telling them that now you can write your name in the cover page to say this is your work, making them proud. So she was able to attract a lot of people from Marvel to go to DC. And at the same time, Marvel, they changed the editor. They put Jim Shooter, who was coming from DC. So he left DC to come to Marvel, and he changed the Marvel culture. He put more bureaucracy, more editors, more rules, more discipline. It was good at the beginning because Marvel was a bit chaotic, artistic, creative. So he put a discipline on it and the sales improved. But at the end it killed the creativity. A lot of artists, they decided to leave and move to DC because DC was more creative. So you see the balance totally changed. Marvel was doing the DC way and the DC was doing the Marvel way. And a big switch on balance, and then DC started to go up until they decided to change this Jim Shooter and put back the spirit of Marvel, and then Marvel came back. Because in this business you need creativity. You cannot just go and kill the creativity with your bureaucracy and discipline. And you need discipline, but you have to find the right balance. You cannot just kill the artistic side of the entertainment, especially in the entertainment. And this rule also applies to the corporate world, not only the entertainment, also in other industries. One thing that really made me surprised is normally as a comic, the comic industry, you will think people are very loyal. There's a lot of hardcore fans. I love Marvel, I hate DC, and the DC people, they say, I hate Marvel, I love DC, Superman is the best, Batman is the best. But in terms of employees, there were no loyalty. So you had people coming from Marvel going to DC, people from DC going to Marvel. Like I said, Jim Shooter, the editor from DC, went to Marvel. You have Roy Thomas, that was the number 2, just after Stan Lee. He left Marvel to go to DC. You have Conway, who worked in Marvel first and then became the editor in DC. You have John Byrne, who was a top artist in Marvel, and left for DC to change the Superman and make it more Marvel with the Man of Steel. So many people moving from one company to the other. But the most surprising is Jack Kirby, who can say is the co-creator of Marvel, the illustrator. He left Marvel to go to DC because he thought his salary was low. That's very surprising. And then Stanley was very angry. He said, how come my co-creator left for DC? It's a treason. And then he came back later because he thought that DC didn't give him enough room for his creativity. But the most shocking of it all is Stan Lee himself. He left Marvel to go to DC. And of course he came back to Marvel, but even the heart of Marvel, he also left to DC because he had an issue on the salary. They stopped to pay his bonus, and he said, okay, it's like this, I go to DC. Which is very, very strange because Stan Lee was, I think, the father of Marvel, but he was an employee. He didn't have any equity. He was only getting a salary, which I think is crazy. You have also the creator of Superman, the one artist that created Superman. He's a poor guy, no money, because he was a salary man, no equity. So the importance of having equity in a company is crucial, because if you're just a salary man, you will never get rich. So those people that created so huge characters, they are not rich like I thought. I thought the creator of Superman would be rich. I thought Stan Lee at least had some equity of the company. No, he didn't have it. And I always, at the time I didn't understand comics, so I always thought, how come we cannot see a Superman or Spider-Man? I didn't know that those two were different companies at the time. But and I said, why not? Why there is no collaboration between those characters? In fact, there were some characters collaboration. You had Spider-Man and Superman in the same comics. You had Batman and Hulk in the same comics. DC and Marvel had some collaboration when they were in a kind of peaceful time, but they were always in war. The last collaboration they had was for the Avengers and the Justice League fighting together against each other. This was the last collaboration. Since then, they stopped any connection. They became such huge companies that they decided never to work again with each other. So even after more than half a century, you can still feel the culture, the values difference between DC and Marvel are still connected with their beginning. And this company culture, part of the company culture, are really an interesting thing that I found in the book. Really interesting. Some key quotes. When everything is an event, nothing is. DC is Marvel and Marvel is DC. What kind of world will be scary enough to compel someone to dress up in a bat suit and fight crime? And then he looked out of his window. I will give this book the grade of B+. Thank you guys, and I'll see you on my next video. If you want to read more books, improve your reading speed, and know the books I read and the insights I got from those books, please subscribe to my channel and give me a like.